Science fiction as we understand it in the West is rooted in the shadow of colonialism. Most iterations of this genre grapple with at least one of two fundamental questions. What does it mean to be human? And what or who else is out there? Science fiction travels to the ends of the universe to answer these questions. It introduces us to strange lands for space travel. It introduces us to the other through alien beings. But the rhetoric of the other in a strange land is not limited to fiction. What is science fiction for some is for others a brutal past and a still brutalizing present. Theory of postcoloniality is a discourse that analyzes, explains, and responds to the cultural legacy of colonialism and imperialism. Because postcolonial discourse is inherently rooted in the examination of the past, and science fiction has traditionally privileged the imagination of the future, it may seem strange to place these two concepts together. But the truth is that science fiction has always engaged with the colonial.
The year 2020. The moon has been explored and colonized, and the next space goal is about to be reached.
The word colonization, as it is used in science fiction, simply refers to the domination or inhabitation of a land and its components. When the voiceover states that humans have colonized the moon, it is implying that the moon was barren and lifeless before the arrival of humanity.
Space, the final frontier.
The word frontier is used in a similarly innocuous way, a borderland or wild region beyond what is known to the explorer in question. In both the pulp-era film and the original Star Trek series, these words are used to denote the metaphysical rise of humanity with their physical exploration of the unknown. Further expansion is seen not only as necessary, but as inevitable. Nowhere do we question the right of humanity to venture into the depths of the unknown, nor do we consider the possibility that we may not be wanted. Out of the almost 200 countries in the world today, over 90% have experienced invasion or colonization by a Western power. Although most former colonies gained their independence in the last century, they have been irreparably changed by this interference. Further interference and exploitation persists in a form of neoliberal trade policies or neocolonial interests of Western-based multinational corporations. The rhetoric of classic sci-fi space exploration is mirrored in the narrative that the United States has constructed around the so-called space race.
This country was conquered by those who move forward, and so will space. William Bradford, speaking in 1630 of the founding of the Plymouth Bay Colony, said that all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties. Man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not.
In this speech, Kennedy reads an inspirational quote from William Bradford, one of the founders and eventual governor of the Plymouth Bay Colony in Massachusetts. Here, the language of science fiction and historical past are jumbled. Although Kennedy looks to scientific progress as a resolution for human ills, he repeatedly references the language of conquest and subjugation of indigenous populations in his framing of the race to space. The persistent imagery of colonialism in science fiction is problematic in and of itself, but it is complicated and compounded by a lack of diverse voices within and behind the scenes. Mainstream science fiction seeks to tell stories about difference while at the same time erasing that difference in the text. As Junot Diaz says, without our stories, without the true nature and reality of who we are as people of color, nothing about fanboy or fangirl culture would make sense. The refusal of science fiction gatekeepers to include conversations of identity and oppression has resulted in an oversaturation of films and literature that only feature white male and occasionally white female perspectives. The few attempts to address post-colonial issues in blockbuster films have fallen flat. Notably, James Cameron's 2009 film Avatar was slammed for its exoticized portrayal of indigenous cultures for the Na'vi aliens. In the same year, Neil Blomkamp attempted to address personhood and segregation in District 9's treatment of prawns, alien refugees that are abused by humans. Both films reference historical events. In Avatar, the Na'vi, with their connection to nature and stilted language, are clearly a stand-in for Native and First Nation people in North America. The segregation and surveillance of District 9's prawns is an obvious allusion to South African apartheid. Both films feature white male protagonists and are written, directed, and produced by white creators for a primarily white audience. When asked to name a mainstream science fiction film that does not feature a white male protagonist, one usually comes up short. A survey of top-grossing science fiction and fantasy films up to the year 2014 found that only 12% featured a female protagonist, 8% featured non-white protagonists, 0% featured LGBTQ protagonists, and 2% featured protagonists with disabilities. The grass is slightly greener on the literature side of things. Alternative modes of publishing, advertising, and dissemination have allowed more writers and marginalized identities to break into the industry. These leaps in progress have not come without consequences, however. The Hugo Awards for Best Science Fiction or Fantasy Works and Achievements were torn apart in 2015 due to resentment over increased diversity in nominees. Postcoloniality, instead, should be understood as an ongoing process by which colonized and diasporic people negotiate their identity apart from the history of colonization or the culture of the colonizer. In the hands of those willing to do the work, science fiction can become an incredible and imaginative tool in this process.